So tell me, do you still subscribe to earlier models of the 12th house in terms of when it would be called the house of self-undoing, or Lily would say it might have to do with witchcraft or the occult? Although I was also always taught that the 12th house was the house of spiritual liberation, and especially the type of liberation found in seclusion of the 40 days in the wilderness variety.
I do, but I'm not limiting myself to that. My whole approach to the 12th house, which, I wrote a 500-page book on.
Yes, I have the first edition. I need to get the
So
second.
the second is really worth it. There's a lot of changes and it's really improved. But just to answer your question, what I feel is that some of these difficult definitions are quite fragmented, and people who study astrology are presented with these definitions without understanding why, what's behind it. So my attempt in this study and in the coming presentation is to understand that there's a thread. There is some kind of evolutionary development that happens through the 12th house. And part of it, and I will say like 5 to 10%, and I would even go more towards the 5, is that self-undoing and, addiction issues or things like that. But the deeper meaning of the 12th house is that in many ways it's a gateway to living beyond time and space and living beyond the material dimension. So it's basically our access to spiritual development, but it's also our access to what unifies everything, everyone. So the reason there's self-undoing in the 12th house is because people who have a concentration of energies there, or even, enough having one planet, if it's strategically influential, is that there's difficulty integrating into time and space. So in some ways, 12th house people feel like they don't really want to be here. They don't understand, and I'm generalizing, of course, there are many variables and layers, but as a whole archetype, there's a feeling that life on a day-to-day basis, which is, paying your bills and surviving and facing the daily struggles, is so limiting. It's so confining when there is such a higher and purer reality. Think about the 12th house opposing the 6th house, which has to do with routine. So the routine, doesn't appeal to 12th house people, and scheduling your day is not interesting. There's a feeling that there's much more to life than this. So in some ways, people with 12th house can feel we tend to think that the 12th house is behind the scenes and hidden, but in reality, people with strong 12th house are actually the most exposed because they don't have protection. They don't totally understand danger. And as a result, they can feel overwhelmed because they are so exposed, because they're such a thin skin. And so there can be adaptation issues. There can be a feeling that they don't want to do this thing called, having a job and paying your bills. And that can lead to escapism, and in whatever way, whether it's sugarcoating things or trying to run away from those responsibilities. But again, that's a small portion of these experiences. I believe, and that's what I want to really dive into as we will explore this workshop, is to understand the sequence. There's some kind of thread and different outcomes. Like if you understand the main motivation, then you can understand what are the possible outcomes. So one of the outcomes is the self-undoing. So I would agree with the traditional definition. My point is that it's just a tiny part of it. There's much more to the 12th house.
That's such a great explanation.